At 46, Ethan Caldwell had once believed he was untouchable. He had built his fortune from nothing, rising through ruthless determination, sharp instincts, and an almost frightening tolerance for pressure. In New York boardrooms, his name carried weight. People leaned forward when he spoke, laughed at jokes that weren't funny, and feared disappointing him. To Ethan, this felt like success. He worked endlessly, slept little, and dismissed relationships as distractions. Power was his companion, and money was proof that he mattered. The fall came faster than he ever imagined. One aggressive acquisition, rushed, over-leveraged, and driven by ego, set off a domino effect. Market confidence shattered. Investors pulled out. Banks tightened their grip. Lawsuits stacked up like bricks around his throat. Within months, Ethan watched his empire dissolve. The penthouse was gone. The cars were repossessed. Even the assistants who once managed his life stopped answering calls. Headlines that had praised his brilliance now dissected his mistakes with cruel precision. With his accounts frozen and reputation in ruins, Ethan took refuge in a small, aging apartment borrowed from a distant cousin who barely knew him. For the first time in his adult life, he needed a job, not for prestige but survival. His resume meant nothing now, so he applied anonymously and was hired as a night security and maintenance worker in a downtown office building. Ironically, it was the kind of property he once would have purchased without a second thought. Every night, he cleaned floors that reflected fluorescent lights instead of chandeliers. He emptied trash bins, fixed loose door handles, and avoided eye contact. Shame followed him like a shadow. He told himself it was temporary, but deep down, he feared this was all that remained. One early morning, as his shift ended, Ethan noticed a janitor arriving for the day shift. The man moved with quiet efficiency, greeting the receptionist by name, holding doors open, smiling without effort. He looked tired but steady, like someone used to carrying weight without complaint. Ethan would have ignored him, except for the phone call. "I'll be there right after school, okay?" the man said softly. "Yeah, I promise. Be good for your teacher." Ethan paused, pretending to check his phone. The tone wasn't rushed or stressed. It was calm, reassuring. The janitor hung up, exhaled, and went back to work as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Over the next few days, Ethan kept seeing him. The man fixed things before anyone asked. He stayed late to help co-workers. When others complained, he listened. His name, Ethan learned from a schedule board, was Daniel Reyes. One morning, Ethan slipped on a damp floor, losing his balance. Before he hit the ground, Daniel grabbed his arm and steadied him. "You all right, sir?" Daniel asked, genuinely concerned. Ethan nodded, embarrassed. "Yeah, thanks." Daniel smiled lightly. "Rough days don't last forever." "I tell." Ethan tried to keep his distance, telling himself that brief encounters and polite exchanges were all this new life allowed. Still, mornings had begun to feel quieter without Daniel's calm presence nearby. Their conversations started small nods, shared coffee in the break room, comments about the weather or a broken elevator, but gradually, something warmer took shape. Daniel spoke easily, never forcing familiarity, never asking questions that crossed invisible lines. That restraint, oddly enough, made Ethan feel safe. Daniel often talked about his son, Mateo, 8 years old, curious, restless, convinced that his father could fix anything with enough patience and duct tape. Daniel described helping with homework late at night, cooking simple meals, and waking early to walk Mateo to the bus stop before coming to work. There was no pride in his voice, no complaint either, just quiet acceptance. "I don't really get tired," Daniel said once, rinsing his coffee mug. "I just keep going. Someone's counting on me." Those words stayed with Ethan long after his shift ended. One evening, a winter storm hit the city without warning. Temperatures dropped fast, and the building's heating system failed just before midnight. Tenants complained. Management panicked. Ethan watched from the security desk as calls went unanswered. Daniel, who had stayed late to finish an extra shift, rolled up his sleeves without hesitation. He worked for hours in the mechanical room, hands red and shaking, until warm air finally returned to the vents. "You should have waited for maintenance," Ethan said when Daniel emerged, exhausted. Daniel shrugged. People shouldn't freeze if something can be fixed. Ethan had once approved mass layoffs to protect profit margins. That night, he couldn't stop thinking about the difference. Days later, Ethan overheard a tense phone call in the hallway. Daniel's voice was lower, strained. Words like extension, notice, and hospital. Bill drifted through the air. When Daniel noticed Ethan nearby, he ended the call quickly and forced a smile. Ethan understood the tone. He had heard it in his own voice once, right before everything collapsed. Later, Ethan learned the truth from a supervisor. Daniel was behind on rent. Medical bills from Mateo's asthma had drained his savings. Eviction was a real possibility. The knowledge sat heavy in Ethan's chest. When he offered help, Daniel refused immediately. "I can't," he said quietly but firmly. "My son needs to see me stand on my own. If I fall, I'll get back up. But he has to know I tried." There was no anger in his refusal, only dignity. Instead of money, Ethan offered something else. He helped Daniel organize bills, negotiate payment plans, and fix paperwork errors that had added penalties. He explained systems Ethan once controlled without thinking: interest rates, assistance programs, small legal details that changed outcomes. Daniel listened carefully, grateful but proud. Helping Daniel did something Change didn't arrive in Ethan's life with a dramatic announcement. It came quietly, in the form of a phone call from a former competitor who had watched his downfall from a distance. The man spoke without pity, without praise, offering Ethan a consulting role, temporary, modest, and honest. There would be no corner office, no public recognition, just work. Ethan accepted without hesitation. For the first time, he wasn't chasing status. He was choosing direction. The consulting job stabilized his finances slowly. Ethan lived simply, tracking every dollar, refusing to repeat old habits. What surprised him most was how much he enjoyed working behind the scenes, advising instead of dominating. He listened more. He questioned himself often. Each decision felt heavier now, because he understood who carried the consequences. Daniel noticed the change. "You walk different," Daniel said one morning, half smiling. "Like you're not running anymore." Ethan thought about that long after. When Ethan's reputation began to recover, opportunities followed. Investors approached him again, cautiously at first. This time, Ethan set conditions: fair wages, transparency, benefits for workers usually ignored. Some walked away. Others stayed. That was enough. With limited capital and a clear purpose, Ethan launched a small facilities management company. The idea was simple. The people who kept buildings running deserved stability, healthcare, and respect. Flexible schedules for parents, no unpaid overtime, no invisible labor. Daniel was the first person Ethan called. "I want you involved," Ethan said. "Not as a favor, as a partner." Daniel was silent for a long moment. "I'm a janitor," he said finally. "I don't have your background." "You have something better," Ethan replied. "You know the work." "You know the people," Daniel agreed cautiously. He studied contracts at night after putting Mateo to bed. He asked questions. He made mistakes and corrected them. Within months, he had reorganized operations in ways Ethan never could have alone. Productivity rose. Turnover dropped. Employees stayed. One evening, Mateo visited the office for the first time. He looked at the company logo stitched onto his father's uniform and grinned. "Dad," he whispered, "you look important." Daniel knelt beside him. "I always was. You just couldn't see it yet." Years passed. The company grew steadily, not explosively, but responsibly. Ethan never returned to his old level of wealth, and he didn't want to. He attended employee birthdays. He listened when people spoke. He learned names. At the opening of their 5th building, a journalist asked Ethan what had truly changed him: failure, loss, or humility. Ethan glanced across the room at Daniel, laughing as Mateo tugged at his sleeve. "Perspective," Ethan said. "I lost everything and thought that was the end. Then I met someone who had very little, yet carried everything that mattered." As the crowd applauded, Ethan felt something he'd never felt at